Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome Minister Mark Fiore, Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Nova Scotia, members of the Accessibility Advisory Board, and all of you to NSCC's IT campus. I'd also like to thank Maria Alley for the lovely music she provided while we kept you waiting. I am the Vice President of Organizational Development for Nova Scotia Community College, and I also serve as Vice Chair of the Nova Scotia Accessibility Advisory Board. So I'm doubly proud and doubly excited to be here today. Making Nova Scotia a fully accessible province is a goal I'm sure we can all embrace. Doing so will improve the lives of our fellow citizens, acknowledge and fulfill their right to fully participate in the economy and life of this province, and in so doing, making Nova Scotia a better place for all of us. NSCC is an access college, and we work hard to make a superior post-secondary education equitably available to students from Nova Scotia and beyond. Earlier this year, we cemented a partnership with the Rick Hansen Foundation to deliver the Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification Program, which will equip participants to provide advice and conduct assessments to help bring our built environment to a high standard of accessibility. NSCC welcomes the opportunity to host this important announcement here today. Now it's my pleasure to ask Minister Mark Fiore to come to the podium. Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Roz, and what a pleasure to see so many people join us today for such an important announcement. Let me welcome you on behalf of the government for your interest and participation. I can tell you it's absolutely inspiring to see so many people in this particular environment. The Nova Scotia Community College, under the leadership of Don Bureau, an accessible education institution and facility, which is a great example of what we can do to support all Nova Scotians in advancing themselves in whatever field of study or employment they choose to pursue. So Don, thank you for your leadership with the Nova Scotia Community College. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are on Mi'kma'ki, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And I would be remiss, I know there's a number of dignitaries here, but I had the pleasure just a moment ago, and I walked in the building with him. Where is Will Brewer? Is Will still here, or did he sneak out? There he is. Stand up, Will. I want people to know Will. Will is the Halifax town crier. And if I'd have been thinking, Will, you'd have been on the agenda and you'd have been doing the cry today here at this ceremony. But I'm not going to forget you. I met Will some time ago, and he was, I would say, the acting crier at the time. Right, Will? And he said to me, Minister, you've got to talk to the mayor. I want to do this full time. So I went to see the mayor. And I said, you know, you got to appoint Will full time. And lo and behold, Will is the full-time Halifax town crier. Not that I had anything to do with it, but Will, you're doing a great job. Continue promoting our city and our province. Last year, as many of you would know, Nova Scotia passed the historic legislation that will make the province accessible and barrier-free by 2030. And since that time, a tremendous amount of work has been done. Government has been out consulting with Nova Scotians and developing the plans for how we are going to achieve this goal. Now we start the heavy lifting. Today, we take the first steps in the next phase of our journey to becoming a fully accessible province. A province where everyone is welcomed and supported, where everyone is provided equal opportunity to work and succeed, and where prosperity and democracy thrive because of fair and equitable treatment. The Accessibility Act and standards aim to bring widespread change literally across the province. And it's important to clarify this work isn't just about modifying buildings. It's about creating a culture shift, an attitudinal shift, to use the words of Don Bureau. And we are seeing that cultural and attitudinal shift, to be quite honest, take off with a level of excitement and enthusiasm I have not seen in any other government initiative. And many of you in this room today are contributing both to the cultural shift and the attitudinal shift that's required. We need to adjust attitudes and recognize that the rights of Nova Scotians to participate in society is fundamental to who we are as human beings. We've set an ambitious goal, and it's going to take all of us, government, academia, the business community, communities at large. I know there's a number of municipal representatives here today, individuals like you working together to achieve the objectives. Today's announcement comes as a result of these particular partnerships. We've been out speaking with persons with disabilities and with members of organizations that support them. We've been speaking with municipalities and with representatives from the education, business, and not-for-profit sectors. And I can tell you these discussions and these consultations has helped us define what an accessible, inclusive, barrier-free province should look like. Collectively, they have brought us to where we are today. And we know the challenges that we faced when the first piece of legislation was introduced. And I give full credit to Jerry Post, and I will mention him again later, to the leadership that he's shown, and a man of optimism, not pessimism, a man of positivity, not negativity, a man of future, not past, who thinks with the best interest of all Nova Scotians in mind. So, Jerry, thank you for the work you've done. Collectively, we have all together brought us to where we are today. With the release of the province's strategy for achieving accessibility and government's own plan for how we can make the work we do on behalf of Nova Scotians more accessible. Access by Design 2030 is our strategy for achieving the goals set out in the Accessibility Act. It identifies the priorities or areas where we need to focus first. Beginning this year, committees will be established to develop accessibility standards for education and the built environment. We will also be working to improve public awareness and increase compliance with existing regulations. As an employer, and as Nova Scotia's largest program and service provider, it is important that we as government lead by example. Today, we will also release government's first accessibility plan. This plan sets out concrete actions that will be taken over the next 3 years to ensure that accessibility is considered in the development and delivery of all policies, programs, and services within our workplace. We've already begun. I chair the Law Amendments Committee. I'm just happen to be the minister responsible for the Accessibility Directorate. So we've already begun with this work in the addition of ASL and CART services at law amendments and ongoing renovations to Province House to improve wheelchair accessibility. These are noteworthy steps, but we also recognize that there is much more work to do, and I cannot emphasize that enough. We have more work to do. But today's strategy and plan is the first step and will help us lead the way. And I'd like to take a moment to recognize the many people who were paramount to this work, including staff with the Department of Community Services and the former Disabled Persons Commission, who led this important initiative in its early days. And I know there's a number of deputy ministers here today and the chair of the Human Rights, CEO of the Human Rights Commission, who have played important roles in ensuring the connectivity of those initiatives and to ensure that we achieve the objectives that we've set out. I know there are members here of the Bill 59 Alliance, many of whom have contributed significantly in the past, and I know you will into the future. And I would say this, individually and collectively, you have taught us a great deal about what most Nova Scotians take for granted every day. Your perseverance and willingness to work side by side has resulted in the creation of a truly for the people piece of legislation. I'd also like to thank Catherine Berliner. Catherine's here today. These are the colleagues that I work with in the Department of Justice and the Accessibility Directorate. Where is Catherine? She's going to kill me for pointing her out. Catherine Berliner and Adriana Maloney, you have been instrumental in this work, and I can't thank you enough for the work you've done, your persistence, and your leadership in this particular area. And as I mentioned earlier, the Accessibility Directorate is led by the fearless and inspiring leadership of Jerry Post, doing outstanding work. He is a mentor. On the odd occasion, he's actually my walk-to-work colleague. And I got to tell you a quick story without mentioning names because we continue to work in a very positive way. I'm walking down Spring Garden Road and come across the end of Argyle Street, and I've got my headphones in and I'm listening to my music and kind of getting ready for the day. And in my peripheral vision, I see 2 feet come into my sight, and it's Jerry. He's catching up to me. He says, come on, come on. He said, I got to show you something. So we carry on a little further down Argyle Street. He points out to me a particular location that is not accessible. And I know he's been persistent in that particular location. And every morning I walk by, I take a look, and I see exactly the vision and objective that Jerry has in mind. And that one example demonstrated to me the personal commitment, the desire, the leadership, the out-of-the-box thinking that we need to move this type of legislation forward and to bring people together to ensure that we secure the success necessary in achieving each and every one of those steps within the action plans to ensure that the application of the strategy hits our target by 2030. So Jerry, I cannot thank you enough for your leadership, your commitment, and your perseverance, your personal attention to these objectives. You are a role model. You inspire all of us, and I want to thank you for that. And I'd be remiss here today if I didn't recognize the tremendous work of the Accessibility Advisory Board. And I see some of our advisory board members here today. I believe they're having their meetings here in the Nova Scotia Community College facility. But I got to point out a good friend of mine, a Lunenburg West resident, Alex Peeler. Alex, give the crowd a wave here. I want them to know where he is in the front. Alex has come into my constituency office on a number of occasions. We've had some great discussions. And there's another individual that has a passion and desire to ensure that every Nova Scotian has equal access to services. He's a leader, not only in the provincial stage, but on the national stage, and been the recipient of national awards for the advocacy that he has undertaken as a young man who will not give up. So Alex, thank you for your contributions. We're so fortunate to have people like Alex and his colleagues step up to the plate and fulfill these roles with the advisory board. One of the board's first tasks was to provide recommendations for a strategy to achieve accessibility, something that we're very happy to deliver on today. And I'd like to thank again Don Bureau and Roz Penfound for hosting us here for this milestone announcement in the Nova Scotia Community College facility. They have embraced the importance of accessibility in the Nova Scotia Community College programming and in the college's campuses. It is leadership at its best. It is the example that we as Nova Scotians are taking a leadership role in as we engage our colleagues quite literally across the country and, to be honest with you, on the international stage. Here at the college, Don and Roz, you have embraced the importance of accessibility within the Nova Scotia Community College environment, and I want to thank you for that. As have our other partners in education. I see Peter Halpin here. Peter, thank you for joining us. Members of the Council of University Presidents, and of course, the countless members of the business community, our municipal partners, who I know are here today as well, community organizations who have made changes to improve accessibility. And I want to give you an example that I heard this summer that I thought was just unbelievable and truly reflects who we are as Nova Scotians and how small efforts make a huge difference. And I'll speak specifically about the Inverness Development Association and the Inverness County Accessibility Committee and their work to provide wheelchair access to Inverness Beach. I saw it on the CBC News. It was a great story. It's examples of what we can do into the future, and I know there's other beaches already taking on that same challenge. Above all, and I've been out to some of the public engagement sessions, and I've had a great opportunity to chat with the average Nova Scotian whose family members are experiencing disabilities or those with disabilities themselves. And I would be remiss if I did not personally thank individual Nova Scotians for the specific contributions you've made, specifically those persons with disabilities who have and continue to provide such valuable and important commitment and input into this work. We need those individual perspectives. I have said this on many occasions before. We need to know and understand the lived experiences of the average Nova Scotian to continue to help us guide this work. And quite frankly, to get us to the finish line. I don't have to tell any one of you, 2030 is going to come upon us real quick. So we can't take our pedal off the metal, as they say. We have to keep our foot on the accelerator and ensure that all of us collectively are working together to achieve these objectives. And with those few comments, I want to turn the microphone over to Jerry Post. Jerry will share some of the details and the discussions had and the ongoing work that will be done into the future within our communities amongst all stakeholders to ensure we achieve our 2030 goals. So Jerry, the floor is yours, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. We're blessed to have you in our portfolio and to be our leader in making things happen. I think we've come a long way in the last, I think it's 368 days since the legislation was proclaimed. And I, as the minister said, you know, what excites me most is that it's a truly community effort. And we've broken the mold in the way the legislation was drafted. First, in the history of the province, was the community invited to sit with the lawyers and some of the policymakers to redraft the act. So let's hope we've set a new standard on how to engage community. And we want to continue that in the implementation of the strategy. And there'll be copies available after this to hand out to you. And also, you know, we not just the disability community, but broader than that. We got to engage the universities who are here today, and we're working with them, municipalities, as the minister has said, and of course the private sector as well. So we've been working closely with them, with Geordie Morgan and the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, the Chamber of Commerce, and others. And we've had seen some successes already, where the government announced in December, which is just a few months after the act was proclaimed, a fairly major program to help business become more accessible. Very generous program. To thank the government for that. As well, the commitment from some of the other organizations like the college here. You know, the next college they'll be building in Sydney, Don promises, will be fully accessible to the Rick Hansen standard. And yesterday I was talking to the president of NASCAD, and they're proposing a new facility. And as well, she said, we want to build this to the Rick Hansen standard. So thank you. I think something is happening in the community, which is very, very positive. I've only been disabled for 5 years. So I'm really a novice disabled person. And what we're doing today, it's really what we established today was built on the shoulders of many, many individuals who've been working at this for years, some all their lives. And you know, the Bill 59 Alliance, I was so fortunate to become part of that. I made a whole new group of friends and colleagues as well, so I feel blessed in that way. And some of those members, it was about 12 of us that got together on a weekly basis at Dalhousie University Law School, and we have to thank them as well for making things happen for us. Some of those members are no longer here. They've left us. Barb Legay, Barry Abbott's partner, passed away recently, as well as Diana Potier, one of the lawyers that helped us, who worked at Dell, who was blind, as well as Clarendon Robichaud. And Clarendon became a very, very good friend, and I'm sure they're looking down on us today, and I gotta really thank them for guiding the way in helping us. So we have two people on the stage with me today who are part of our disability community. We're going to say a few words. One is Clary Stewart. Clary is a Haligonian, but now lives in Antigonish. I'm not sure what do they call people in Antigonish. Antigonishonian? Okay. So Clary is well known in the community, particularly through his work with wheelchair basketball. He was on the Canadian team, played with Rick Hansen, is in fact a member of the Wheelchair Basketball Hall of Fame. So we have a Hall of Famer here. But as well as worked very diligently in the community. As well, he's got a lot of expertise. He's been in the home health business for quite a while. And he decided that he was going to take the Rick Hansen course to become certified as an assessor, to hopefully set a whole new standard on accessibility. We're the second province in Canada to have initiated this, and I've got to thank Don and his team for making it happen with us, as well as the Department of Communities, Culture and Heritage, who happened to provide the funding for it. So really it was again a community effort within government to make that happen. So I'll hand the mic over to Clary to talk a bit about what he's been doing with the course and all that. And so Clary, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jerry. Some interesting statistics, I think, that I was looking over before I came here today. 1 in 7 Canadians have a disability at this point. And in 20 years' time, they're expecting that number to grow to 1 in 5. And right now, there are more people, more Canadians, 65 and older, than there are those 15 and under. So we're all getting older. And we are going to have people who need more inclusion and more accessibility to allow them to be included in the program. The name Rick Hansen has been bounced around here a lot, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with Rick. He was a teammate of mine another lifetime ago, it seems now. But back in those days, Rick would talk about, during our practices and scrimmages and just grabbing a beer afterwards, saying, I'd like to wheel around the world. Rick, wheel around the world. Yeah, and I'd like to go to the moon. You know, it was an idea that he had even back then, and of course, he's accomplished his dream with the Man in Motion tour, and he brought that message of inclusion and accessibility all around the world, and he has continued that work all these years later. And his foundation, knowing that we had this kind of legislation coming into effect federally and here in the province especially, thought there was a need to develop some kind of a program because there was no standard for measuring accessibility. What level of accessibility is your business at? Well, we have no way of really comparing you to anybody. So they developed this program called the Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification Training Program. It's a long one. And if I get a card, it's going to be a really big card. It'll be like, but he developed that program, and it is a way for us to do that. And the course was offered here at NSCC in the springtime, and I did sign up, and I took the first week. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, I shouldn't say it that way, but the night before the second week was to start, my grandson decided that he was going to make an appearance in this world and to the family. So it was the first one. I thought that was pretty special. So I didn't make it to the second week. But I did sign up, and I am going to finish the course this coming October offering. My first week, though, with the course was really an eye-opener for me. I've worked in home health care for some 30 years, mostly with residential work, doing accessibility things like bathrooms and rampage and that kind of thing. But I wasn't really familiar at all with universal design. And that's what this is really focusing on. It's not just mobility access that we need. It's people who are hearing impaired or visually impaired, and cognitive or intellectual disabilities also have to have accessibility if they're going to be part of our community. And it really focuses on that. And I was quite blown away. The course is very intense. There's a lot of classroom work, visual aids, and then we do on-site visitations and rate these businesses for their level of accessibility, or accessibility rather. So if you have a rating below 60%, you're not certified. If you are 60 to 79%, then you have a Rick Hansen certification. If you're gold standard, you'd be 80% or above. And one of the first companies, interesting story too, in BC, is SAP Lab Canada, I believe, who got the gold standard. And the story was that the people kept coming into the building saying, "Where are your accessible washrooms?" Well, all of our washrooms are accessible. So, they didn't require any signage, but people kept asking so many times that they actually had to put signs up, wheelchair accessible washrooms. It'd be a wonderful thing if we didn't have to ask where the wheelchair accessible washroom is, because they are all accessible. This is just one sample. So the universal design is quite incredible to see, and I'm looking forward to completing the course. And going back to my community, there'll be assessors all across the province, and part of our job will be as well to indicate that it's not because of legislation that you should make this change. It's not to be charitable. It's not because of human rights. It's an economic issue as well, because I have money, not a lot, I have a little bit, but and I like to eat out at restaurants. But if I can't get into your restaurant, I'm not going to bring my daughter in there, or she's not going to go, and my wife, certainly not my grandson. So you're losing that business because of that. So there are benefits, not just to be a charitable person, to make sure that you're accessible. So I'm looking forward to completing the course and going home to bring that message and hopefully help to make our live, learn, work, and play areas more accessible.
Thank you very much, Clary. It's much appreciated. Our next speaker is Vicky Lubbock. Many of you know Vicky. Originally from Berwick, now lives in Halifax. She's a student, an activist, an author, self-published author. Her book, Bloodlust, I haven't read it, but I think I will. It's a new genre that from what's called vampire erotica, so it should be interesting. But she's also very active. She was very active at Dow's. She had her own radio show there called Disability Debunked, talking about various things that people don't like to talk about. Without further ado, Vicky, the stage is yours.
Yay. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Well, I guess it's not morning anymore. Good afternoon, everybody. As Jerry said, my name is Victoria Lubbock. I'm a 27-year-old woman living right now in a nursing home on Purcell's Cove. And they covered all the basics, so I guess I'll leave that out. A lot of people, when they think of the term accessibility, think of like having a ramp or an automatic door or something of that nature. Accessibility, as the minister said before, means so much more than that. Accessibility means that eventually I will live in a world where I don't have to worry if I'm going to get a job because of my disability or because I'm good at it. It's living in a world where once I get that job, which I did, thank you very much, I will be able to get to work on a city bus without having to worry that my first day I may not be able to make it because I can't get a ride to work. Accessibility means that I will be able to visit my niece in her home where she is comfortable without having to worry about, can I get through the door? Accessibility means being able to go down the street to anywhere I choose to shop and I'm not looked at funny when I go there. I've heard some pretty awful things in my day. The worst thing I think I ever heard was, if I was you and I had a disability, I would kill myself. Now, that's not very nice, to put it mildly. And accessibility to me means that we live in a world where that idea just doesn't cross people's minds. We live in a world right now where I'm looked at and people go, wow, it's a girl in a chair. And I hope to live in a world where it's one day, huh, that girl's in a chair. Moving on. I want to be able to go where I want without having to worry about, can I, go to the bathroom if I need to? Can I access the bank machine at my bank, which I can't right now? I want to live in a world where everything is open to me, not because I'm disabled, but because that's just the way the world is, and everyone deserves an opportunity. I want to live in a world where my niece doesn't have to go to her mother one day and go, why is Aunt Vicky different? I want us as disabled persons to be visible and to be respected. As a disabled woman in this province, until very recently, I thought I would never get that. I thought I would be able to have to fight for it my entire life, and to be here, and not to brag, but to be this young and be able to experience it, I think is a great gift. And I just want to give a shout out to NSCC, because they gave me the job. So thanks for the gig. And they're not just they're not just talking the talk, they're actually implementing it. So that's really great. Because a lot of people say they're going to do things, and then they don't get done. I'll go to things like restaurants and be like, you should have an automatic door. And they go, yeah, we really should. But things don't get done. And thanks to this legislation, they finally will be done. And maybe one day I can shut up about disability and just be me. Thank you very much.
Well, that's pretty hard to follow. When you heard me speak earlier, I was speaking as vice president here at Nova Scotia Community College. Now I'm speaking to you as vice chair of the Accessibility Advisory Board. I want to thank everyone who's offered remarks today, and all of you for coming, and especially Minister Fiore for the wonderful announcements he's made today. The Accessibility Advisory Board is made up of community members and has a mandate to advise government on accessibility issues. The majority of our members are persons with disabilities. Today's announcements are indeed exciting. The board is pleased with the priorities outlined in Access by Design 2030. It sets a clear direction for how we will achieve an accessible Nova Scotia by 2030. We want to ensure that Nova Scotians are aware of the rights of persons with disabilities, understand the impact of barriers to participation, and take action and remove barriers. We want to ensure that everyone has equitable access to all facets of life across Nova Scotia. This includes buildings and outdoor spaces where we live, work, learn, and play, inclusive education, employment, information and communication, goods and services, and transportation within and between our communities. There's a lot of work to do, but the board is confident that there's a commitment from government, communities, and the public and private sectors to help lead this change. The board is also pleased with the actions set out in the first Government of Nova Scotia plan as well. These outcomes and priorities for becoming an accessible organization are important. We look forward to helping to achieve these goals and advising on future accessibility plans. We're grateful that the province of Nova Scotia is moving forward in such a tangible, concrete way. The Accessibility Advisory Board will continue its work to provide advice to government on accessibility and disability issues in Nova Scotia. We're looking forward to working with standard development committees and consulting Nova Scotians as we develop recommendations for the first accessibility standards in education and the built environment. We're dedicated to ensuring the success of the Accessibility Act and Access by Design, and know that can only be achieved when the voices of persons with disabilities are heard. We'll continue to ensure persons with disabilities across Nova Scotia are consulted in all of this work. We can't make change without you. Achieving accessible Nova Scotia is about changing the way we think, the way we act, and the way we design and deliver programs and services. We know this is an ambitious goal, but one that is achievable. Change starts with each one of us. I'd encourage everyone to think about what you can do to demonstrate leadership in accessibility and work toward equitable access for all. In closing, I'd like to thank all the government and NSC folks that made all of this possible and set everything up and had it all working for us. Speakers who were on the stage today will be available to talk with media or others down on the main floor. Thank you once again for being here. Good afternoon.